When I came home, I discovered that there was something amiss. Things were off, right? My front door was open. There was a few speckles of blood in my bathroom. What it was a very gruesome crime scene. Meredith had been raped and stabbed to death. Immediately, everyone just starts yelling or screaming in Italian. I'm the only person who's not fluent, who's trying to figure out what's going on.
The police play in that grey area between are you a suspect or are you a witness?
I went into a state of almost immediate denial, this cannot be happening, this cannot be happening.
Today, I spoke to a guest I'd been hoping to get on the podcast for years. Amanda Knox has experienced things in her life that is hard to comprehend. As a 20-year-old American student living in Italy, she gained international attention when she was charged and convicted of involvement in the murder of her friend, Meredith Kercher. This was a crime she did not commit. The media attention was unprecedented. Her reputation was destroyed. She spent 4 years in an Italian prison and another 4 years fighting to clear her name. We spoke about what happened, the impact it had on her, and how she came to terms with the injustice that destroyed her life. When you hear what Amanda has to say about the experience, you'll be shocked and angered. I enjoyed the chat and found it quite inspiring. It also opened my mind up to the fact the one thing we can control in life is how we process the things that happen to us. Amanda Knox, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Nice to meet you. I'm glad you catch them.
Well, just on the name, I want to put that out first up. If ever there was an inappropriate name for a podcast speaking to a guest like yourself, it's I Catch Killers. So I do apologise up front. That is reference to the fact that I was a homicide detective for over 20 years. So even that's probably a red flag for you. And
No, I wouldn't say so. No, I don't.
Okay.
I think people assume that I have a thing against law enforcement, and it's no, I don't have a thing against law enforcement. Law enforcement is a very important thing to do. Someone broke into my home and raped and murdered my roommate, and law
Yeah.
enforcement had a very important job to do that, unfortunately they didn't do well, but that doesn't mean that other people can't do the job well.
Yeah, well,
So.
if my experience having been involved in law enforcement and all other sides, there's good, bad, indifferent in that field. But I'm glad you've got that attitude. But yeah, when we're reaching out to get you on the podcast, I thought, I Catch Killers, former homicide detective. That might be a hard no thanks. But we've got
I try to give everyone a fair hearing.
fair call. Now, look, first up, and in looking at your story and understanding your story, and I've followed it for a long time, so I've got an in-depth understanding of it. But something that comes across, and I think it's important that you've always been at pains to pay tribute to the fact that you lost your friend, Meredith Kercher.
Yeah.
And quite often in these situations, high-profile investigations, it gets lost in the telling. Is that something that you're very mindful of, that someone, your friend, a girl, had her life tragically taken, and sometimes that gets lost in all the noise surrounding the investigation?
Yeah, it's a terrible, unfortunate reality when it comes to any kind of, especially high profile cases. But I think even in any case, I think that sometimes there is much made of the sensationalism around what happened and around the person that we are accusing, be they guilty or innocent, and the personality. Like I've seen this time and time again
Yeah.
where the just getting down to the bare bones of what happened and how did this person become a victim
Mm.
gets lost around the whole story and the scandal that erupts around the circumstances that arise in the aftermath. And it's something that is it has always been deeply troubling to me because, from the minute that I came home and found my home a crime scene, I went to law enforcement. I had my boyfriend call them because I didn't
Mm.
even know how to call them in Italy. looking for help. And I wanted to know just as much as everyone else what had happened and how this could have happened and if there was a serial killer on the loose. Like, I had no idea, but I wanted whoever had done this horrific thing to be held accountable.
Mm.
And I wanted this beautiful person that I had known to have some kind of justice, even if everything had already been stolen from her. And I think one thing that I grapple with as someone who has come to be the name and face associated with my friend's death and with some other
Yeah.
person's crime is a cruel and unfair reality that I am faced with. Like, I bear the infamy of my friend's death and
Yeah.
some other man's criminal actions.
Mm.
And for me, that's it's just violence against women upon violence against
Yeah.
women. And I see them, I feel like today, I feel like Meredith and I are like two sides of the same coin. I'm just the side that got lucky and lived. But there are many examples of, in this case especially, of violence against women. And one of them is the fact that the truth of what happened to my friend got completely forgotten
Mm.
in the midst of all the scandal of it.
I fully understand what you're saying, and I think people that haven't experienced what you've experienced or understanding the world of homicide, the ripple effect from one person's death. There is so many people's lives that have been impacted upon, and certainly yours, Raphael, your friend or boyfriend at the time that was also charged,
Yeah,
Patrick, your employee, Meredith's family. Like,
of
there is
course.
no closure when you lose a loved one. It can, get some comfort if the person responsible is found, but there's no closure. So, yeah, you're working in the media now. I worked in law enforcement, now in the media, and I'm trying to make that get that message across in the media that we shouldn't lose sight of what happens when someone's life has been taken, and all the bells and whistles, all the things that can make the story interesting. Sometimes the victim is forgotten and the impact that has. So I just wanted to put that up first up because coming into the podcast world, true crime, coming from a homicide detective's point of view, I didn't want the pain and the damage that is done lost in telling stories. So I'm glad we could put that up front.
I'm glad that you're mindful about that, because not I think everyone sort of forgets that uh, with true crime stories, these are the worst experiences of real people's
Yeah.
lives. And it's I think it's really easy to forget that when we get so titillated by all of the details.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, so I appreciate I think the fact that you have a history of investigating these crimes and being so intimately close to them informs that perspective for you. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's The other thing about in preparing for the podcast, like I've had hundreds of people on the podcast over the years, and with some amazing stories, international reputations, and all sorts of things. But I've never gone down a rabbit hole as much as I have looking at what's been written about you. I say this that. What's that experience like? I have not seen someone scrutinised as much as you. Like I've just been blown away. Normally, okay, I might have a book to read or a documentary to watch or some media reports, but it's unbelievable how much coverage there's been of this case, and in particular focusing on you very unkindly too in some aspects.
Yeah, if you go down the YouTube rabbit hole, you'll find uh, supposed expert upon expert upon expert who thinks they know what they're talking about and can like divine almost divinely what the truth is based upon, scrutinizing a 5-second video clip that they
Yeah.
saw. Um, yeah, I mean, before all this happened to me, I was an anonymous college student who had zero aspirations of becoming a public figure, much less
Mm.
a public figure in the world of true crime. Like I was studying to become a translator. I really love to travel. Like when I, was thinking about what I wanted for my life, I imagined being a translator and traveling the world and maybe working for the UN, like who knows. But I certainly was not ever aspiring to have such a white hot searing spotlight shined upon me and the most intimate details of my life for decades.
Yeah.
And uh, uh, and I've had to live with that reality for my entire adult life now. I've attempted to accept it and do the best that I can with it. Um, but it's certainly not easy
No.
knowing that there is a false idea of me in so many people's imaginations before they ever encounter me. And that false idea of me is going to inform how they view anything that I do in my life and even how they interact with me. I mean, confirmation bias, if you already have an idea of who a person is, that's going to color the way that you view reality around that person. And it doesn't escape me that I represent something. The idea of me
Mm.
represents something in people's minds, be it evil, be it something weird and sexual. Like it's bizarre, especially because this happened when I was so young. Like I think people forget how young I was. I was only 20 years old when this
Mm.
happened. I did not have a ton of life experience. I didn't have, you know, uh, I didn't have the maturity to grapple with how much scrutiny I was going to face. And it's been a long time um, living, again, bearing the infamy of somebody else's crimes. Like, if you
Yeah.
were to ask just any random person who actually killed my roommate, would they be even able to say his name?
Mm.
Like, that bothers me.
Yeah.
And, but I think that accepting that reality means that I'm allowing myself to learn from it and to be informed from it and to be driven by it to try to like fix it. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think it's been an extraordinary journey. And the fact that you're 20, it's probably also adds to the situation that at 20, you don't know anything, but you think you know things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I got
Yeah. I
this.
like to joke that like your 20 is that age where you think you know everything because you just learned what the word Kafkaesque means.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, so that's it's that's a dangerous combination, thinking you know and
Yeah.
you know nothing. But the other thing with it, and I think this gets lost in the story too. If this just happened to you, where you've got a friend and you only had known her a short time, but there was a strong bond as you get as you're travelling as young adults,
Yeah.
that was your flatmate that was murdered. I've seen people that have been traumatised for the rest of their lives by that one experience where they weren't accused of it. It's just they hang on to the thought that could have been me. I've lost a friend. All the emotion, all the dramas that come along with that. So just on that aspect, it's traumatic experience for you. Then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank
r-
you. I mean, I appreciate that. Not a lot of people acknowledge that.
yeah.
Um,
Uh, uh,
and yeah, like it haunts me to this day.
Well,
I,
of course it should haunt you. Not many people experience it. And then the way you were treated, and I'll break it down. We'll give a little bit more detail, but I just want to say up front, the way, and in my observation, and just talking to you to now, but also all the times that I've seen you interview and read your books, that you've walked away without being broken, without being bitter. You really are the postwoman for resilience and tenacity to get through it,
oh.
and you still have a
I mean, I
smile on
wouldn't
your
say I
face.
wasn't broken. I feel like I've been broken a few times on the way. I've just had to mend.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, no, congratulations on that. But let's find out a little bit about you before you went to Italy. Describe the type of person you were.
Yeah, so like I said, I was a 20-year-old college student. I was in college in the same, city where I grew up because I really love to be close to my family. I have a big extended family. not quite as crazy as my big fat Greek wedding, but a little bit up there. Like we're all in
Okay.
each other's business. I have lots of cousins. I just grew up in a big sort of communal family type scenario. And also that was informed by the fact that like my mom was born in Germany. And so I'm not like your typical all American girl because I
Yeah.
have those sort
That
of
international.
European roots.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I grew up really curious about the wider world. I studied Japanese in high school. I studied abroad for the first time in high school by going to Japan.
Mm.
Was one of the best experiences
Would have
of
been
my
fascinating.
life. Yeah, and I just got the travel bug. I got I was deeply interested in other cultures and other languages. And so when I went to college, that's what I wanted to study. Um, I also was a big reader and I love to, dress up in costume and play pretend. To this day, I go to like Ren fairs. My brother-in-law is a Ren fair performer, and so I'm like his biggest fan. and and yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I played sports. I did well in school. I didn't really ever have anything super challenging happen to me or
Mm.
traumatic. Like, I feel like I just had a really stable and loving environment, and I had the classic like puberty struggles, but like
Yeah.
nothing, I wouldn't say anything traumatic had ever happened to me. And so going to Italy, I had every reason to feel like I was about to have the time of my life. And in a way, I was like
Mm.
leading up to the tragedy that happened. Like I was having a great time. I was making friends. I got a little part-time job. I was doing good in school. And I met a very lovely Italian guy who just swept me off my feet and treated me like a princess. And so, I mean, everything was
Yeah.
going great. And I was a very happy person.
And that comes across certainly in what I've read about you. That particular time in life, that's about as exciting as life can get. The
Yeah.
foreign studying overseas.
Did you study abroad?
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time overseas, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like when you were like 20 and young, because there's something special about being 20 and young and unattached and
Well,
your whole life's ahead of you, you know?
before I joined the police, I went to on a surfing trip. So it probably wasn't
Oh,
studying; I
cool.
was more studying myself. But
Yeah, that counts.
to Sri Lanka of all places, where
Oh,
surfing wasn't
wow.
very big at that particular point in time. I'd already signed up to join the police, so I had to come back. But I think if I hadn't signed up to join the police, I could have been lost on a beach in Sri Lanka, standing on my head chanting. Uh, but yeah, they're great experiences, and I could see the joy. And then you had your roommates. You had Meredith, she was from the UK, and she
Yep.
sounded like she had the same outlook on life as you did, and the excitement
Yeah.
of living abroad.
Yeah. Yeah, so she was a year older than me, and she had worked really hard to get to Perugia.
Yep.
She was more fluent in Italian than me, so she was actually taking classes in Italian, whereas I was taking classes to learn Italian. And I mean, she was doing so great as well. Like she had this really close group of friends, all people also
Yeah.
from the UK who she would go out and hang out with, but also she would go out with us roommates. We lived with two other Italian girls who were slightly older than us, and so who could kind of guide us and be more of like host figures. Like they
Yeah.
showed us great restaurants and took us out dancing. And so it was me and her were the young foreigners in the household, and we were under the wing of these two older, more sophisticated Italian girls who lived with us, and it was a lot of fun.
Okay. You're there, as my understanding, for about 5 weeks before Meredith's murder happened.
Yeah.
You'd met Raphael the week before, had known him for a short time,
Yeah.
blossoming romance, and then things all went bad from there. Tell us what happened, just an abbreviated version, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people understand what took place. But if you could give it from your perspective, how you came
Sure.
home.
Yeah, so it was a holiday weekend. It was technically not the weekend yet, but it was a holiday. It was the day after
Yeah.
Halloween. There was no school. And Raffaele and I had spent the night together at his place, and we had this grand romantic vision of going off to this town nearby called Gubbio, which was famous for its truffles. He, as well, again, treating me like a princess, sweeping me off my feet, wanted to show me all of the everything beautiful that Italy had to offer. And so he had this grand romantic plan, and I wanted to go home and frankly, like get changed into something pretty because I was, in this beautiful romantic
Yep.
love story, basically. And so I went home, and my intention was simply to take a quick shower, get dressed into a cute, outfit, and then go back so that I could go off with Raffaele. But when I came home, I discovered that there was something amiss. And it wasn't immediately clear to me what was wrong. But things were off, right? Like
Yeah.
my front door was open. Um, there was a few speckles of blood in my bathroom, but nothing that immediately alarmed me to the
Yeah.
actual horribleness that had happened. Um, the one thing that alarmed me immediately and that gave me sort of a shiver down my spine
Mm.
was when I found feces in the bathroom that my Italian roommates
Yeah.
had. So there were two bathrooms, and I and Meredith used one, and Philomena and Laura used another.
Yeah.
And I only went into their bathroom to use their hair dryer. But when I was in there, I noticed that there was feces in the toilet, and that immediately gave me the creeps
Yeah.
because I felt like my roommates wouldn't have left the toilet unflushed, and that made me feel like I was afraid all of a sudden that somebody was in the house with me.
Yeah.
And so I left, and I went back to Rafaele's, and I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to think. There was weird stuff in my house." But he was like, "Well, I don't know what that is, but you should just call your roommates and see what's going on." And so I start calling my roommates. I can only get a hold of one of them,
Yeah.
Philomena. Both Laura and Meredith are not answering their phones. And I tell Philomena what happened, and she says, "Oh my gosh, okay, well, let's go home and we'll check it all out together." So I go back with Raffaele, and we start poking around and looking more seriously at what's going on. I was just sort of in and out that first
Yeah.
time, take a shower, get changed, leave. As we're poking around, we discover that there's a broken window. So someone has definitely broken into our house. And immediately I ask Raffaele to call the police because our house has been broken
Yeah.
into. And meanwhile, I'm calling Philomena, telling her what's going on. And we're continuing to look around the house to see if there's anything missing, if anything's stolen. We go into Laura's room. Everything is perfect. Nothing has been touched. Her bed is still made. And then we go to Meredith's room, and her door is locked, which is weird because
Yeah.
the only times I've ever seen her lock her door was when she was inside, and she's not answering when I bang on the door. And I ask Raffaele to try to kick in the door. He tries to kick in the door, doesn't succeed. And eventually we just go outside and decide to wait for Philomena and the cops to arrive. The cops arrive first, but they are not the cops that Raffaele called. They're different
Yeah.
cops. They have found Meredith's cell phones, and they don't know whose cell phones they are at the time. They're saying, "We found these cell phones and they're registered to Philomena." So there's this whole like confusing atmosphere going on of what is going on. Where is Meredith? Where is Philomena? Where's Laura? Why are Philomena's phones here? That doesn't make any sense. I
Yeah.
just talked to her on the phone. So we're all just trying to make sense of this. And it's only once Philomena arrives and starts talking to the police that she explains, "Well, I gave the SIM card to Meredith, so those are Meredith's phones. And where is Meredith? We need to figure out," like, and I tell her the door is locked to her bedroom. She's like, "What are you talking about?" And then basically she and her boyfriend finally kick in Meredith's door and
Yeah.
discover her body.
Mm.
And Meredith, like, I never thankfully saw into her room.
Yeah.
Um, like I eventually saw, autopsy photos and all of that, but like I never had to see it personally myself.
Yeah.
What it was a very gruesome crime scene, right? Like Meredith had been raped
Mm.
and stabbed to death by the person who had broke into our house. And immediately everyone just starts yelling or screaming in Italian. I'm the only person who's not fluent, who's trying to figure out what's going on. We're all sort of pushed out of the house by the police. And now my home is a crime scene. It's under investigation. I'm no longer allowed onto the premises. I'm just sort of standing there trying to take in what is happening. I don't know what my roommate has seen in Meredith's room. She's screaming something about blood and a foot and the closet. And so I'm wondering if there is a bloody foot in the closet. Like, I just don't know what's
Yeah,
going on. And it takes time and help from Raffaele to piece together what it was that was discovered, which is Meredith's body in
yeah.
her room.
Amanda, with the chaos that you just described, that's a situation I'm very familiar with when you get called to a homicide scene and all that. I think the confusion and the chaos worked against you from a prosecution point of view, assumptions that were being made and things, and the way you described it. And I've looked at your story from the homicide lens and thinking, okay, I could see how that could be interpreted. This could be, but it looks like it was just a series of things that worked against you, and there was the cultural language barriers that I
Yeah.
think came into play, and the expectation of how you reacted. I think there was a lot drawn from, and this is correct me if I'm wrong, lot drawn from how you're reacting to the report of your friend being killed. Now, I see that quite often in policing, in investigations, and what I've learnt over the extended period of time, everyone reacts differently to situations.
Mm.
Sometimes we're showing no emotion. You think, oh, they're being cold, and I think that was the situation thrown at you. You've described the scene and the chaos, and you've learnt that your friend's been killed, so you got the trauma there. Then when the police started investigating it, my understanding is that you were in interrogation, and the difference between an interrogation or getting a witness statement. But in essence, for 5 days, you spent 53 hours sitting down with police. Do you want to tell us that experience from your perspective? Because that would have been very confusing, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, all of that started, like, as soon as they pushed us, like, even before they pushed us out of the house, like, I'm answering police questions
Mm,
and attempting to respond to what they're asking, not fully again, not fully fluent in the language, so am I understanding their question correctly? Am I responding to their question correctly? There's definite, like, language barrier that's playing a role. And then, of course, in the immediacy of being told there's a body in there, like,
yeah,
I go into a state of like complete shock. I sort of go dead possum where I'm just like, I mean, I mean, you can see footage of this now
mm,
to this day. You can go back and look, and I'm sort of just like staring into space, like,
yeah,
oh my God. Meanwhile, my roommate, who is Italian and who actually saw Meredith's body, is like freaking out and crying hysterically. And so people are noting, oh, here's one roommate just standing there and another one who's crying hysterically. And it's like, well, there are cultural differences, there are language differences, there's age differences.
mm,
There's the fact that like I'm like again, nothing bad had ever happened to me in my life, and so I
yeah,
went into a state of like almost immediate denial, like
yeah,
this cannot be happening, this cannot be happening. And then eventually I'm dragged off to the police station along with everyone else to answer questions. And I'm doing this to the best of my ability in a foreign language.
yeah,
And I'm telling them everything that I know, which is nothing. Like, I
yeah,
just came
yeah,
home and found my roommate dead, and there's no rhyme or reason that I can think of for this happening. They're asking me, did anyone have any, did anyone hate Meredith or have anything against her? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah,
she was just a nice person. We're just here to study abroad. Like, who would even know her long enough to hate her? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I immediately am thinking that there must be some kind of serial killer out there, maybe who targeted the house. When I finally get a moment of like, I'm no longer, I go through hours of questioning with the police and I'm finally released from that just for a moment in the waiting
yeah,
room. And I call, my parents, I call my family to try to tell them what's going on. It's the middle of the night for them,
mm,
like everyone's just scrambling. And I mean, it's interesting that people again are focusing on my behavior and saying that I was cold or not crying enough because, even looking back, it's not like everyone was crying hysterically in the police station. There were a
Yeah.
lot of people who were also experiencing just shock
Mm.
and just like going into a state of numbness and then intermittently crying. Like, I mean, I feel like I honestly wasn't that much different than anyone else. Like, suddenly I would get a full, like, I would feel just kicked in the stomach with the reality of what was happening, and I would cry. And then, a few minutes later, I would just be exhausted and depleted and just sort of sitting there like a zombie. And my boyfriend's there doing his best to be the knight in shining armor that
Yeah.
he aspires to be, and he's comforting me and you know try like letting me sit on his lap and cuddling me and even telling me some jokes to try to cheer me up. And that it ended up being turned
Yeah.
against me, of people saying, how could he have told you jokes and how could you have giggled at a time like this? And it's like, well, I'm sitting there for hours answering questions, trying to figure out what's going on in this extremely brutal and overwhelming situation. And somebody next to me was
Yeah.
kind enough to try to like alleviate my suffering in
Yeah.
some way, even in a stupid way.
And
And like,
that is how those little signals can be misinterpreted, and you throw in confirmation bias on
mm,
what the police are looking for, and when they've come to the belief that you had some involvement. All those little things that on their own could be just dismissed, as you've just explained, then become this lightning rod to, okay, this has happened. I saw her talking to her boyfriend. How could she possibly talk to a boyfriend? But the interrogation was oppressive. I was going to say impressive, but that would be the wrong word. It was
also,
yeah, it was oppressive in that the length of time. You didn't get a solicitor there to represent your rights. There's argument that the police play in that grey area between, are you a suspect or are you a witness, and that there's
yeah.
situations there. My research on the Italian justice system, it's more inquisitorial. So
Hmm.
the people are more heavily involved that are going to present the matter to court, which we've got an adversarial system in Australia, and it's by no means perfect, but I think it gives a little bit of checks and balances that
Mm.
disrupts the power. When did you
It's interesting
realise?
you say that
Yeah,
because, like, when I talk about that with my prosecutor today and how involved he was from the very beginning
yeah,
on an like from an investigative
yeah,
standpoint, right? You're pointing to the fact that the prosecutor and the police and the detectives, the people who are investigating, are in bed with each other in a big
yes,
way, whereas in an adversarial system, they're not in bed with each other. Like
yes,
the prosecutor is supposed to be a check against the investigation to make sure that they're upholding, they actually have a case and they're upholding people's human rights and all of that. When I talked to my prosecutor about it, the way he looks at it is he says, well, it's, I mean, he thinks that the Italian system is always better. So, like, he's always sort of saying that, like, the inquisitorial system is better because I, as a prosecutor, am impartial. And therefore, if I'm involved from the very beginning, I'm ensuring that the police are proceeding in their investigation in a way that's impartial. And that's when I have to be like, Giuliano, you are not impartial. You are not like some godlike figure who is able to like put his own biases like off the table as
yeah,
he's in this situation. He himself, like, actually, I was going to ask you because
yeah,
you're a professional homicide
yeah,
detective. Like, one of the things that my prosecutor says, and he says this openly, not just
yeah,
to me, is that the reason why the police and he
yeah,
initially assumed that I was somehow involved was because from the very beginning, they never believed that a person had actually broken into our home.
yeah.
They immediately like assumed that the break-in was staged and
Staged.
therefore someone in the house was
Yeah.
involved in this crime. And they sort of narrowed it down almost immediately to me. Can you explain this to me?
No, I can't. And
Okay.
the reason I say I can't is that I've looked at the facts as much as I could get access to, and how they could interpret that this place wasn't broken into. Let's dumb it down. If there was a staged crime scene and the window had been broken from the inside out, that would forensically the evidence would support the fact that that this is a staged break-in. But nothing in what I've read or heard about your case, there was forensic evidence that said it. It was just an opinion. No, someone wouldn't have broken in there. And that is the danger, because that's when that confirmation bias really comes in. Okay, it's staged, it's someone involved. So they weren't looking for the random offender, someone that wasn't connected to the property. They're looking right from the start that it's someone that lives within in the property or has an association. So that's where it goes wrong. Just winding back a little bit on the issue with it's great because the prosecutor's working with the police. I call that, and triggering for me, that's intellectual arrogance. That, I'm sorry, I'm a qualified solicitor, therefore I'm independent and professional in the way I approach things. Bullshit, I say. Like, they've got all the human failings that police have got, but when you
Yeah.
combine prosecution and the police all working together, feeding each other's narratives, I can definitely see how it goes wrong. Ideally, in our situation where police, I might turn up and go, this is a strong brief, and I've got the prosecutor looking at it objectively saying, no, I think we're short there. They're not as involved as the police, but that's a good checks and balances. With
Right.
your situation, it looked like they all just fed off each other's narrative, and you were the one that came unstuck with it.
Yeah, and it didn't help that, like, the international media had descended
Mm.
upon this small town immediately, and that there were just journalists from all over the world who, like, were there the next day just, like, prowling, trying to find any kind of information. Everybody was reporting on it, and so there was a lot of pressure that the
Yeah.
police and the prosecution were under to, like, deliver answers,
Yep.
and, with that initial, like, I can understand if they are going off of that false premise of, well, it's a staged break-in, then
Yep.
somebody in the house has to be involved. Like, I can understand
Yep.
how they can then logically deduce, well, we gotta make sure Amanda's telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yep.
But the problem is at no point did they ever say, well, maybe we could be wrong about that. They were just like 100% sure about it. And they then went about the task of breaking me until I was willing to
Get,
confirm what they had already believed.
what I got a sense with your situation, as you just described it, it was okay. We think Amanda's involved. The evidence isn't supporting, but we're just going to run with it, and we're going to push and push to 53 hours. And it was a tough interrogation. It was, you were clearly being intimidated, and just the mere amount of time that you're in there without a independent interpreter. Yeah, that wouldn't
Yeah.
wash in here in Australia. You would be strongly criticised for that. There's a lot of things that wouldn't stand up. What they finally got from you that worked against you was an in part admission. Do you want to tell us what happened there and what
Yeah.
your thinking was there?
Yeah. So, and to be clear, it was 53 hours over 5 days. So
Yeah,
it wasn't like I was in one room for 53 hours
understood.
straight.
Yep.
What it was over 5 days from the discovery of Meredith's murder to my arrest. I was really at the beck and call of the police, and voluntarily, in the sense
Mm.
that, like, if the police were asking me to answer questions, I did not at all question going in and being of assistance. Like, I mean, I didn't really know what else to do. Like, suddenly I was homeless and I was now sort of staying with Raffaele until I could get back on my feet. The police conveyed to me very early on that I was very important to the investigation because I lived in the house. I was so close to Meredith. I knew who she hung out with. I was the one who came home and
Mm.
discovered the crime scene. So, of all the people that they could treat as like an important witness, I was their most important. That's what they told me. And I believed them. And so I willingly subjected myself to what was an incredibly overwhelming and exhausting situation. I mean, that first day of questioning, it went, I mean, I think it started around noon and it went overnight and into the next day. I was allowed to go home to get 4 hours of sleep before I was
Mm.
brought back into the police station to answer questions. And so I really, like, even like my sense of time was distorted because I was sleep deprived over the course of these 5 days. And of course, even when I was finally allowed to go to sleep, I was, you know, in, I
Yeah.
was dealing with the freaking my roommate had just been murdered and I was not sleeping well. And
Understandable.
so I was just like, in the days leading up to that final interrogation, I was already sort of being hammered down a bit. Like
Yeah.
I was answering the same questions over and over again. I was being asked things that I didn't know the answers to and sort of it felt like I was frustrating the investigators because they expected me to know things that I
Mm.
didn't know, like details about Meredith's sex life.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to know like really fine-tuned details about uh, what like if she used Vaseline in her sex. I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know any of this information. And and they kept like, I mean, it was a lot of pressure that was put on my shoulders to sort of be the person who would break the case for them. And they kept saying things like any little minor thing that that you can think of that maybe you don't think is important, but that could make or break the case. And so I really got into my head of like, I need to just like try to figure out if one person looked at her in a weird way, was
Yeah.
that the murderer? And so here I am just being exhausted. I'm feeling really wrung out. And that final night, they didn't even actually call for me to be come in for questioning. They called for my boyfriend, Raffaele. And I was faced with a choice. So I think they called it like 10 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
We were getting ready to go to bed. And they called him and said that he had to come in for some follow up questions. And I was faced with a choice. Do I stay home alone, which scares the living crap out
I
of
can
me now?
understand that.
Or do I just go with him to the police station? And so I chose to go with him to the police station. And I brought my schoolwork. I thought that I was just going to be left alone in the waiting room and I was going to do my homework. That's what
Yeah.
I was doing. And as I'm sitting there in the waiting room, a police officer approaches me and is like, "First of all, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just doing my homework. I'm waiting for Raffaele." And he's like, "Well, as long as you're here, we might as well ask you some questions too."
Yeah.
And so he starts asking me questions, and eventually another police officer arrives and is like, "Well, if you're asking her questions, we need to do that officially in an office, and I'll type up the answers." And I'm just like, I just want to go to sleep. But they bring me into there and they confront me with a lie.
Yeah.
And it was a lie. I had told them. They had explicitly asked me in the days before if we smoked marijuana in
Yeah.
our house. And my roommates told me that I could not tell the police the truth
Yeah.
because everyone would get into trouble.
Yeah.
So when they explicitly asked me, I lied and said no.
Yeah.
What I didn't know is that in the apartment downstairs from us, the guys, like basically the guys who lived in the same house with us, but
Yeah.
just in the apartment below, they were growing marijuana in their bathroom.
Right.
And
Okay.
so I had no idea that this was the case. And so the police obviously did not believe that
Yeah.
we did not smoke marijuana in our house. And they confronted me with that. And they said, "You're a liar.
Yeah.
What else are you lying about?" And I was I was just overwhelmed, like, "I'm so sorry." I was sort of put off on the wrong foot, and I was like, I know that I lied, and I'm sorry I lied, but I'm not lying about anything else. I was just afraid that everyone would get into trouble."
Yeah.
And they just kept pushing and saying, "Well, we don't believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
What you're saying doesn't, we're going to have to go over everything again and make sure you're telling the truth this time. And so we have to go over everything again, the same questions over and over. But then there's this like focus on what did I do the night of the crime? And they are asking for like minute details and what exact time did you have dinner and what exact time did you watch a movie and how
Yeah.
long did it exactly last? And here I am trying to like perfectly put together a timeline for them, and I'm doing some guesswork. Like I think we
Mm.
got to Raffaele's house around 5:30. Like I wasn't looking at my watch the whole time. And they're using that, like me not being able to perfectly construct a timeline, as evidence of me either lying or of me not remembering the truth.
Yeah.
And they introduce this idea to me that I don't remember what really happened.
Mm.
And the reason I don't remember what really happened is because my mind blacked it out. My mind blacked out the truth because I witnessed something so horrible that my mind just could not take it and blacked it out. And they even say that my mind made up memories of that night that aren't real to cover up for this horrible
Yeah.
thing that I must have witnessed.
What you're describing there, and I look at it and from a policing point of view, you are the type of person that's ripe for manipulation in that situation. Like your age, your naivety about what's gone on. You were close to it. There potentially were answers for you there. The line about the marijuana, that should have been accepted as, I'd be disappointed in you if you didn't lie. Firstly, that would be understandable. Of course, you got to have a go and lie. But I can see how it just escalated to the point, and then they got things from you that fitted their narrative. That my understanding that maybe I wasn't there. Because you were with Raphael, as I understand it, the whole night at his
Yeah,
place,
I
and they were
spent all
working.
night with him. Yeah.
And that they
And
were working him on the same thing. Well, but you were sleeping at some time in bed. Maybe she snuck out then, and vice versa. So I can understand the chaos and the confusion. I'm just mindful of the time. What I want to do is when we get back, talk about the realization that it's gone from I'm just a witness in a horrific situation. I'm doing the best to help the police. I'm not doing that good a job. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the spotlight for being charged with my friend's murder. Like it's part of the reason I think it captured everyone's attention is that it just seems so unbelievable that your story, what you've been through, and that if it can happen to you, it can happen to anyone.
yeah.